All right, back here with another draft analysis. A little bit late. I apologize for that, guys. I was dealing with some stuff on my end personally. But anyways, this is number six, and number six is Jared Kurp. Now, Jared's been around for quite a while, and now there is some traditional Jared style Pokemon in here, but I do want to say that I think he drafted a very serious captain. And Jared's a very, very good player when he's playing consistently. So to pick a consistent captain like Alola Muck, I think this is a very good indication that Jared really, really wants to win. Um, but yeah, anyways, I scored his overall team 39 and a half. I think this is a very well balanced team. There's a couple things that I might have added, but again, might have added because in that place is some extra bulk and power. So we'll see how it plays out in the season. But yeah, so 39 and a half, eights across the board, and hitting 40, I would say is like a above average, well balanced, well made team. So he's right there. His offense, I scored a 8.5. So his offense is interesting, and it can be, his defensive Pokemon are very offensive as well, is what I'm trying to get at here. Obviously the obvious offensive Pokemon like Basculin, Pyroar, Jolteon, Girder, Mesprit, Muck, all those. But you take a look at his defensive Pokemon, they also have access to boosting, and very scary levels of boosting. Girder, sorry, not Girder, Regirock having Iron Defense, Body Press. If you don't have a Ghost type, or if you don't have something to ×4 hit the, not ×4, to hit this Regirock hard, this is going to be a real problem, especially if you don't have anything in the special attacking department to hit this. Then we have Gramble, who has access to Bulk Up, ability Intimidate, Fairy typing, has decent coverage, but his Bulk Up is actually viable because his base stats. Now he has base 90 HP and base 75 defense with Intimidate. So I mean that's pretty easy to set up, in my opinion, in this level of draft. With being lower tiers, you send that in on a Death or something like that on a Pokemon that's really got nothing to hit Gramble hard with. You Intimidate, then you Bulk Up. Well, I mean that's that's a problem right there. I mean, you gotta watch how you KO Pokemon and what's gonna come in after, especially against Jared's team. So, and then next up, as an offensive Pokemon that's generally gonna be defensive, is Noctowl. So this is his obvious defogger on his team and his way to get rid of hazards or screens. But don't sleep on Noctowl's Nasty Plot set, because it's actually very terrifying. The reason that's terrifying is if you don't have a Ghost type, it's got, I believe it's Hyper Voice, I think is what it carries. Let me just double check. Yeah, Hyper Voice. I mean, you could Hyper Beam too. That would be an absolute nuke. It does have good coverage, Hurricane, Heat Wave, Extra Sensory, or Future Sight. Future Sight would actually be pretty annoying. I hope I see him use that. I think that would be actually very excellent. But yeah, so the Nasty Plot, Hyper Voice, and why I'm mentioning the normal type attacks, which are Stab as well, is his ability in Tinted Lens. This Pokemon's attacks that are not very effective on a target deal double damage. So this is a really hard Pokemon to switch into, and its stats are really, really good for being a Tier 5 Pokemon, bar its attack and defense, which are both base 50, but base 100 HP, base 86 special attack, base 96 special defense, base 70 speed. That's nothing to just brush off, especially if you get a Nasty Plot in. That's hitting pretty hard. Let me get you guys the actual stats here. Yeah, so what is, sorry, I just want to see what its actual special attack would be after a Nasty Plot boost, if it was a defensive Pokemon that just had Nasty Plot, to keep people honest. Okay, so if this is a Noctowl that's defensive, by the way, base 100 HP with no EVs put into it is 341. That's pretty high, in my opinion. So a, say, defensive nature, just for the heck of it, with no EVs invested in special attack, that's 208. Nasty plot, obviously, that's a +2, so we're sitting at 416. And then tinted lens, that's absolutely terrifying in my opinion. So as an offensive Pokemon to look at on his team, that's a very, very scary Pokemon to watch out for. Definitely scout that before you just overlook it. But back to his actual offensive Pokemon, Muck is an excellent offensive Pokemon with great coverage, and Pursuit being allowed in this draft. It's an excellent Pursuit user. So now I'm doubting myself after the Noctowl thing. I want to check if it has Pursuit. Yeah, okay. Not to mention its amazing defensive typing as well. Allows it to come in a lot. So a really annoying part about offensive Muck is, A, he's really bulky, but knockoff Poison Touch is just so devastating. Knocks off your item and then has the opportunity to poison you at the same time, and it's a stab knockoff. That really sucks, especially if that's on a Pokemon that's supposed to do well against this team. It's not easy to switch into is what I'm getting at. So very, very good offensive Pokemon, and like I said before, an excellent captain. So standard stuff with the Muck, though, it's got great coverage. You don't want to switch into it without knowing what it has. Poison dark typing, it's only weak to one thing, which is ground. Immunity to psychic for that girder to effectively come in. Knockoff gunk shot, fire punch, brick break, clear smog, which is actually very useful. In my opinion, in draft, a lot of people just want to set up and cheese or get those 6-0 wins for that differential. So clear smog could be an option. Also has stockpile, which is be pretty annoying on a pretty bulky Pokemon like that. And then it's got taunt and toxic, so it just has other options. But I generally see this coming as like a bulky offensive Pokemon. Watch out for that curse set as well. So a very, very strong offensive threat for Jared in that Muck, Alola Muck. So we also have. Sorry, I just need to get a drink here. My mouth is getting dry. Another offensive Pokemon for Jared here is Mesprit. So I'm going to name all his offensive Pokemon to look out for here, but Mesprit, Girder, Jolteon, Basculin, and Pyroar are his general offensive Pokemon. Mesprit being your bulky chip, U-turning, momentum type Pokemon. Scouting is what I expect it to do a lot. Has a plethora of coverage. I won't go over all of its coverage, but I mean, similar to Muck, make sure you know what this Pokemon has before you just switch into it. A very strong pick by Jared again in the Mesprit. Especially with the Muck, Mesprit, and Girder. They actually really form a great little core there. Girder being weak to Psychic, Muck being immune, Mesprit being weak to Dark, Muck not being weak to Dark, and then Muck also resisting Fairy types for that Girder as well. So yeah, Mesprit having tons of coverage. Overall, this is going to be one of the most useful Pokemon, I think, on his team. I expect it to come pretty much every single game, similar to how the Muck is going to be brought. Next up, you have Girder. We've seen this in week 1 and 2. Girder is really great setup Pokemon, very, very bulky with Eviolite. Has an enormous amount of coverage, very hard to switch into effectively because it still hits pretty hard, and like I said, its coverage is just it's really great. I mean, it's got access to poison moves. So this is the thing with Girder too, is what I want to mention, is the reason that it's hard to switch into because even the Pokemon that threaten it, it still has moves to effectively deal with it, especially if it's the Guts set. So for example, you're running the Guts set, you have Facade, obviously. The Guts set generally runs Facade, Drain Punch, Knock Off, and then maybe Mock Punch or whatever you need to run for coverage. So you're thinking of switching in a Ghost type to immune the Facade. Well, he has Knock Off. He decides to Knock Off, he's killing you. Especially with the Guts. If you're thinking about switching in a Fairy, just Facade. I mean, this is going to do huge amounts of damage anyways, and same with switching in a Flying type. Facade is just going to use or do a ton of damage. Not to mention, he can just run a coverage move in that 4th slot instead of running Mock Punch. Because Mock Punch isn't super necessary. I do like it on the Girder, but sometimes coverage is really great on the Girder. So, you know, in that 4th slot, it can that would be the guessing game, is knowing what's in that 4th slot and what type of bulk up set he's going to bring. Now, there is a couple other things you could do with Girder. I don't really expect him to do the other things. The Gut set is just so much more useful. But the Iron Fist Life Orb set is actually really strong as well. It doesn't do what Guts is going to do for his team. So, but anyways, moving on, we got Jolteon. Now, Jolteon's a great, I think it was tier 5. I want to check this because Jolteon is really not that great without hidden power, in my opinion. But with hidden power, it makes it actually really good. So Jolteon was a tier 4. Still a great tier 4 pick, especially with the access to hidden power. Its speed tier is absolutely enormous. Base 130 speed, hits around 390, I think is what it is. So 390 speed, I mean, that's really going to outspeed just about everything in here unless it's Scarfed. Now, there's a couple Pokemon that will be around the same speed tier, but I think that is one of the fastest, if not the fastest. I'm just double checking here. I actually think that's the fastest Pokemon in the draft. Yeah, so having that speed tier in this type of draft is really great. He's not forced to run Scarf. He can run Specs. He will need to watch out for Scarfers because there are Scarfers that can reach that speed, and Jolteon does have pretty weak base 8 defense. So that is something to look out for. Not to mention the fact that his team kind of shares a little bit of a ground weakness. But again, he can circumvent that by having the Mesprit come in or the Noctowl. Jolteon also covers Noctowl with the Volt Absorb, which is really nice. So Jolteon being able to run hidden power and cover whatever it needs in the matchup. And outside of that, it's going to be, Volt Switch, Thunderbolt, Shadow Ball. I think it has one other coverage move that's not often used. No, it does not. But it does have access to some neat moves that could be useful in certain matchups. It does have Heal Bell, which is kind of takes a little bit of pressure off the Gramble or Girder running Guts or Gramble running Heal Bell. He could run it in the 4th slot since he doesn't really need. He can run Thunderbolt, Volt Switch, Shadow Ball, Hidden Power, or he can run Volt Switch, Shadow Ball, Hidden Power, and Heal Bell if it's absolutely necessary, and still specs it. But as for that, that's about it. The Jolteon, you generally are gonna know its exact set every time it comes. I don't expect them to use any really weird stuff. Although I do want to mention that weird stuff is being used, and weird doesn't mean bad, it just means that it's thinking outside of the box. For example, Robin used a Toxic Protect set with Feraligatr, so like I'm saying, I mean, I don't expect him to use that, but it's still viable, especially in a low tier draft like this. Do I think it's going to threaten a whole entire team? Probably not. But anyways, moving on from Jolteon, we have Basculin. This is probably my favorite pick on his team. I don't know why this Pokemon always gets overlooked and picked very, very late. And it is still sitting in tier 5. It has adaptability, it has flip turn, it has hydro pump, it has ice beam. Hidden power is allowed in this draft. Its base attack and base special attack are really not that bad. Base 92 attack, base 80 special attack, and base 98 speed. That's really good. It also has Mold Breaker, so if you needed to, you could run Mold Breaker, Liquidation, Flip Turn to make sure that those water absorbers. I think there is one water absorber in the draft. I'm not going to go over it right now, but anyways, yeah, Mold Breaker can be used to break those water absorbers, but generally you're going to see adaptability. Also has Aqua Jet, Superpower, Psychic Fangs, so it does have Taunt as well, which could be used, and Headbutt. It has, so what I'm getting at here, it has pretty good coverage and have adaptability and the option to Bandit or Life Orb with Flip Turn is going to hit really hard if you do not have a water absorber. Why this Pokemon gets overlooked every single draft, I have no idea. I think this is the second time Jared's drafted it. Not to mention, Specs Adaptability Hydro Pump is an absolute nuke. So, very, very strong part of Jared's offensive group here. But why I don't think I've seen him use it in the first 2 weeks. Interesting. Maybe he fears a Rocky Helmet or something. But I do think this is the strongest offensive Pokemon on his team. This thing is going to absolutely, decimate teams when he does bring it, if he chooses to. So next up we have the Pyroar. Just quickly, I want to mention, the reason why I spend so much time on the offense on most teams here, unless their defense is just completely overwhelming, like Hayden's, for example, generally there's just a ton more to talk about on the offense in terms of sets and what they want to do and all those things. When you get into like things like hazards and momentum and speed, it gets much more technical. There's a lot less things to talk about because a lot less Pokemon are going to be utilizing those things. Whereas, almost any Pokemon could be offensive, unless it's something like Pyukumuku, right? But anyways, the Pyroar. So this is a momentum, snowbally type Pokemon for him. It does have terrible coverage, but the access to hidden power makes it a little bit better. The Moxie set is what I expect to be used in most cases. It does have great speed, great special attack in this type of draft. HP is also quite good. Base 86 HP, 109 special attack, 106 speed. So that is actually pretty good in this draft. With the hidden power, I think that really helps out its coverage. Because it really ends at Fire Blast and Hyper Voice and hidden power, and that's about it. So, not much more to say. I think this could be used as a Suedo defensive Pokemon here. It does have some neat defensive options here: Taunt, Toxic, Will-O-Wisp. Yawn is another really great one if Jared really wants to force people to switch. It does have Dark Pulse as well. That's not too bad. But anyways, that's really kind of where it ends with Pyroar. You're generally good. If you see him use Fire Blast, it's offensive. He's going to have Fire Blast, Hyper Voice, Empower, and some either weird niche move or, Overheat or something like that to really nuke somebody. But there's not much to Pyroar outside of that and the cleanup Moxie. So, last, I think, I did already mention the defensive threats that can be used offensively, which were Granbull, Noctowl, and Regirock. So next on the score is his defense. I rated an 8. Now, his defense kind of shares a little bit of an Earthquake weakness, but this is really kind of covered with Noctowl and Mesprit, both having, immunity to it, right? Noctowl being a little bit more difficult to switch into because it's base 50 defense is pretty bad. For example, if Who's a strong Earthquaker? Okay, yeah, that's actually a really terrible. I was about to mention Piloswine, but um, Piloswine's gonna kill it with Ice Shard or Icicle Crash, right? So for example, let's say Golisopod, okay? Golisopod's gonna Earthquake your Reggie. I mean, he would lick. Okay, Golisopod's gonna Earthquake your Jolteon. Your Jolteon switches out. Why your Jolteon will switch out? Who cares? I know it's faster, but your Jolteon switches out. You go to Earthquake. The guy predicts with Golisopod. He just uses Liquidation. That is more than likely going to do at least 50% to that Noctowl. Just because it's base 50 defense, that's pretty low. And with threats like that in the tier, with around 350 or higher attack, it's still going to hit the Noctowl pretty hard. So just a quick example on that. But defensively, he has Muck, Regirock, Gramble, and Noctowl. Muck and Mesprit, they could be offensive and defensive since they're both bulky attackers is how I would explain them. But generally it's going to be Regirock, Gramble, and Noctowl. Regirock being a reliable rocker, has access to Thunder Wave, and like I said earlier, is a threat still if you don't know the set, because Iron Defense Body Press is extremely oppressive in my opinion. You have Gramble, which has Bulk Up, which I mentioned is viable because of its stats and Intimidate, but it also has Heal Bell and Thunder Wave, which is also really, really strong. Especially, the Thunder Wave is kind of flying under the radar here, but Thunder Waving and allowing Muck and Girder and Mesprit to move first in some cases is going to be really, really strong for him, since they're generally bulky Pokemon with not really strong reliable recovery. So if they can move first and KO Pokemon instead of getting hit and hitting harder back, it's going to be really helpful to his team. So next up we have the Noctowl. Like I mentioned, its base 50 defense is the only letdown of this Pokemon, but otherwise, if it's switching into special attacks that it's not weak to, it has great special defense and HP. And also, like I mentioned, its HP with no investments is 341, so that's quite high. And it also is an offensive threat with Nasty Plot. It can still run Defog and Roost and run Nasty Plot and Hyper Voice, especially if there's no Ghost type to worry about. He can just do that and not have to worry about a thing. So definitely something to watch out for. His defense is a bulky defense, is how a bulky chipping type team is how I would explain it. So, and what makes his defense scary is, like I said earlier, all of them are able to boost and still run their average normal sets, barring Regirock maybe, because he would probably want to run Iron Defense, Body Press, Rest, Sleep Talk, just so he has some reliable recovery. So, as I mentioned earlier, Muck having Poison Touch and Knockoff is really annoying as a defensive Pokemon. To be able to cripple a team like that is extremely frustrating and hard to deal. But that's kind of how his defense goes. It's bulky coverage. All of them are able to set up. All of them are threatening. This makes his entire team threatening. So scouting is going to be really important for Jared. Jared's going to just be able to really click buttons. For example, he can just knock off Poison Touch, everything. He doesn't have to worry about using that. Generally, I think that's going to be a really good option rather than damage, unless it's something that's going to immune the poison or something. Right? But as for that, solid 8. It's not like a defensive core like like Hayden's or something like that, but it does have options in a trio, as in Muckalola, Girder, and Mesprit. But generally, it's a defensive. How do I explain this? His defensive Pokemon, and what make the score an 8 is their presence, their threat. Especially if you don't know the set, all of them are threatening. So I've said that like 5 times now, but that is a really huge point to Jared's defense, and I think that's what makes his defense really strong. Is they're all very, very scary and threatening. So, but anyways, his speed, I scored an 8 as well. Now you're probably thinking, oh well, he has Jolteon, probably the fastest Pokemon in the draft. Why isn't it a 10? Um, he has fast Pokemon, but fast Pokemon as in Jolteon, Pyroar, uh, Mesprit, Basculin, Noctowl. Those all have pretty, barring the Jolteon. Uh, Everything but Jolteon is pretty average. It's a little bit above average, maybe. But outside of that, it's pretty slow. So let's say you cripple the Basculin, or cripple the Mesprit, or cripple the Pyroar. Obviously, you can't cripple the Jolteon unless you have Sticky Webs. But once you cripple those Pokemon, and if he's not carrying Heal Bell, his team's going to be quite slow, and it might be hard for him to recover from that. So that is why it's an 8 and not a 10. But overall, a above average speed tier for his team. Mesprit and Basculin and Noctowl both having probably a little bit above average in terms of speed tiers. I should ask Leo for his speed tier board where he has all the tiers and people's teams. That would be actually really useful. But yeah, anyways, an 8. I think that's good. Above average. Next up is hazards, which I scored a 7. So this is the, remember if you were here earlier, the beginning, I said that there is a couple things that I might add into his team that I think were lacking, but in place of that is bulky coverage, offensive threats. So in the hazards, what I'm referring to is he has one defogger. So while his team doesn't really care too much for rocks, rocks are still really good. So if somebody can get rocks, it's going to put a ton of pressure on the Noctowl to get in. If they have a reliable rocker, that forces Noctowl to probably run heavy duty boots. And come in more often, allowing you to more easily predict what Jared wants to do. So he has defog on Girder as well. I really don't expect that to be on Girder. It is an option if he really needs it, if they have multiple rockers and it's just something that he's got to deal with. He has that option. And Girder can be reliable as a defogger. I mean, he's bulky enough, especially with Eviolite. So, but that is my one thing that I would mention is maybe instead of something like Pyroar, he could have a Rapid Spinner or something to help the presence of Noctowl and not put so much pressure on its shoulders. But like I said, the Pyroar is still good because of the Moxie threat. In a low tier draft like this and having 106 special attack with the Moxie. Wait. Does Moxie only work for attack? Oh boy. Yep. Well, yeah. If that's how it works and it's only for attack, not like attack or special attack, whatever one's invested more, that really shoots down my Pyroar thoughts here. If that's the case, I really recommend Jared switching the Pyroar out, since he's not able to properly utilize Moxie. I feel like Pyro is kind of just a fire blaster, and he has other options to deal with anything that's needing to be hit by fire types. Muck being one of them with Fire Punch, and Girder being fighting type or having Fire Punch as well. Muck also having Gunk Shot if you needed to hit a grass type or something like that, but Girder can cover those steel types well. Yeah. If that's the case, I would really like to see Jared pick up something that's going to help him circumvent those rocks. A really good option would be a Silvally, in my opinion, allowing him to be bulky, have setup, and be able to kind of take the pressure off Noctile's shoulders a bit here. So that would be my recommendation on the hazards part. Switching that, if it is the case with Moxie, I think would definitely put up his hazards to an 8, maybe an 8.5 if it was the Silvally. So last up, we have his momentum, which is an 8. So if the Moxie works the way it does, with just boosting the attack, this is definitely going to drop down to a 7. That extra point was that Moxie ability to snowball. So, but anyways, we'll get off of that point. But momentum, he has U-turn and volt switch and flip turn. These are going to be really useful, especially if something has the threat of earthquake. Jolteon can just volt switch out and pull in Noctile or Mesprit. I would generally think Mesprit is going to be the option since it's going to have the coverage to deal with whatever is opposing with earthquake. So, and as I was saying earlier with Basculin, that flip turn, if you don't have water absorb and he's banded, is going to hurt your team. It's really, really going to take some chunks out of your team. So with flip turn, I mean, just using flip turn, it's wall breaking, especially in this tier draft. That is a great momentum booster for his team, keeping him and putting him in advantage state. So Basculin can also be used to clean up. It does have a decent speed tier, which is 98 base. So, but as momentum, that's kind of where it sits. You could also mention the Regirock can easily snowball out of hand. I totally agree with that. Iron defense, body press is extremely annoying and really good. If you don't have a ghost type, this is going to be really, really hard to deal with, and I expect him to bring it if you don't have a ghost type. So be prepared for that. And that is one of the most threatening things about Jared's team to end this off, is his defensive Pokemon having offensive capabilities. So overall, Jared's team 39.5. I think this is a team that can do really well, especially if Jared's being consistent in his prep. And the best part about his team, in my opinion, is his defensive Pokemon having offensive capabilities. Hats off to Jared. I think this is a great team, and he picked a great captain. So again, I apologize for this being late, guys, and the next week's, I promise, will not be late. So I look forward to making some more, and we'll see you guys on the next one.